I felt very excited when I arrived at Thornfield Hall. The house was large, but it seemed very quiet. Mrs. Fairfax met me at the door. She was an old lady with a kind face. "Sit down, Miss Eyre," she said. "You look tired after your journey. Later you will meet Adele." "Is Adele my student?" I asked. "Yes, she is. She is French. Mr. Rochester wants you to teach her English." "Who is Mr. Rochester?" I asked. Mrs. Fairfax looked surprised. "Did you not know? Thornfield Hall belongs to Mr. Rochester," she answered. "I only work for him." "Is Mr. Rochester here now?" I asked. "No, he is away. He does not come very often to Thornfield. I do not know when he will return." Later, I met Adele. She was a pretty little girl. I spoke to her in French and began to teach her English. She enjoyed her lessons, and I enjoyed teaching her. I liked Adele, and I liked Mrs. Fairfax, too. It was quiet at Thornfield Hall, and sometimes I felt a little bored, but everybody was kind to me there. One afternoon, I walked to the village to post a letter. It was winter, and there was ice on the road. As I was walking back to Thornfield Hall, I heard a noise behind me. It was a horse. A man was riding towards Thornfield Hall. I stood on one side, and the horse went past. The man did not see me. He was a stranger with dark hair. Suddenly, with a loud noise, the stranger's horse fell down on the ice. The man was laying on the ground, trying to get up. I ran forward to help. "Are you hurt, sir?" I asked him. The stranger looked surprised to see me. "A little," he answered. "Could you help me to catch my horse?" "That's right. Now could you bring the horse here, please?" "Thank you." The stranger tried to stand up, but his leg was hurting too much. He looked at me again. "Could you help me to get up on its back again?" "Good. Thank you, miss." I watched him as he rode away. "Who is he?" I asked myself. "He is not handsome, but he has an interesting face. I would like to know him." When I got back to Thornfield, everybody was very excited. Mrs. Fairfax was very busy. "What's happening?" I asked her. "Oh, Miss Eyre," said Mrs. Fairfax. "It is Mr. Rochester. He has suddenly come back, but he will probably go away again soon. Now, Miss Eyre, you must go and put on your best dress. Mr. Rochester wants to meet you and Adele after dinner." Later that evening, I took Adele to Mr. Rochester's room. I felt rather afraid of meeting Mr. Rochester. I went quietly into the room and saw a man there. I knew him. It was the man on the horse. So the interesting stranger was Mr. Rochester. But sometimes, in the evenings, he talked to me. He was usually serious, and he did not smile or laugh very often. But he was interesting, and I was not afraid of him. I began to enjoy myself more at Thornfield Hall. One night, I woke up suddenly. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning. I thought I heard a sound. Everything was very quiet. I listened carefully, and the sound came again. Someone was walking about outside my room. "Who is there?" I called. Nobody answered. I felt cold and frightened. The house was silent. I tried to sleep again. And I heard a laugh. It was a terrible, cruel laugh. I listened. Someone was walking away, going up the stairs to the attic. What was happening? I decided to go and find Mrs. Fairfax. I put on some clothes and left my room. The house was quiet now, but suddenly I could smell smoke. Something was burning. I ran to find out. The smoke was coming from Mr. Rochester's room. I ran into the room and looked around. Mr. Rochester was asleep in his bed, and the bed was on fire. What can I do? I thought. Quickly, I looked around the room. Luckily, there was some water in one corner. As quickly as I could, I took the water and threw it all over the bed. Mr. Rochester woke up. "What's happening?" he shouted. "Jane, is it you? What are you doing?" "Mr. Rochester," I said, "your bed is on fire. You must get up at once." He jumped out of bed. There was water everywhere, and the fire was still smoking. "Jane, you've saved me from the fire. How did you know about it? Why did you wake up?" Mr. Rochester asked. I told him about the noise outside my door and the terrible laugh. Mr. Rochester looked serious and angry. "I must go upstairs to the attic. Stay here and wait for me. Please do not wake Mrs. Fairfax." He left the room, and I waited for him. At last he came back. He was still looking very serious. "You can go back to bed now, Jane. Everything is all right now." "Who lives in the attic?" I asked Mrs. Fairfax the next day. "Only Grace Poole," she answered. "She is one of the servants. She is a strange woman." I remembered Grace Poole. She was a strange, silent woman who did not often speak to the other servants. So perhaps it was Grace Poole who walked around the house late at night and laughed strangely outside the doors. That evening, when Adele finished her lessons, I went downstairs. Mrs. Fairfax met me. "Mr. Rochester left the house early this morning," she said. "He is going to stay with his friends. I think he will stay with them for some weeks. I do not know when he will come back." For several weeks, the house was very quiet again. Mr. Rochester stayed with his friends, and I continued my lessons with Adele. I did not hear the strange and terrible laugh at night again. One day, Mrs. Fairfax showed me a letter from Mr. Rochester. "He's coming back," she said, "and he's bringing a lot of visitors with him. I'm going to be very busy getting everything ready. Miss Blanche Ingram is coming too. She is very beautiful." Mr. Rochester and his friends arrived. The visitors were all rich, important people. Miss Blanche Ingram was among them. She was beautiful, but very proud. Some of the visitors were nice to me, but the others did not notice me. I was too poor and unimportant. Miss Ingram never spoke to me. She was not interested in me, but she seemed to be interested in Mr. Rochester. She always seemed to enjoy her conversations with him. They often went out riding together. "I think Mr. Rochester will marry Miss Ingram," said Mrs. Fairfax. But was Mr. Rochester interested in Blanche Ingram? He seemed to like her, but he did not look very happy when they were together.